Thank you, everyone, for being with us. We do have a chat box for questions. So if you do have questions for our speakers, please put them in the Q&A. And I'm so excited to welcome Allyson Witherspoon from Nissan, Angela Zepeda from Hyundai, Melissa Grady from Cadillac, and Andy Thomas from McLaren. And with that, let's get started. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give a brief introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about your journey to your current position. Allyson, why don't you start?
Sure. I'm Allyson Witherspoon, and I am the U.S. Chief Marketing Officer for Nissan. So I'm responsible for all of our marketing activities and all of our customer experience activities. So I've been in automotive my whole career. I started consulting and agency side, and then I've been on the client brand side for a little bit over 7 years. And I've done assignments in Europe as well as in Japan. And now I am back in the US.
Excellent. Angela?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Angela Zapata. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Hyundai. I've had a long career, most of it on the agency side. So worked in automotive, but also financial services, consumer packaged goods, tech, communications, everything across the board. Many years doing that. And then I circled back into automotive, working for Enotion, which is the agency for Hyundai. And then about 18 months ago, I got to make the move over to the Hyundai side, the corporate side, and have been Chief Marketing Officer since then. So a long journey, but a very good one. I'm responsible for all of the advertising and marketing for the United States.
Wonderful. Melissa, tell us about yourself.
Hi, Melissa Grady. Like Angela, I have worked in a variety of industries. I started in automotive early on in my career. Then I went into tech. I was at Motorola for a number of years. I was in insurance and some other financial services businesses. And then about a year and a half ago, became CMO of Cadillac. I've actually been here for 2.5 years now, back in what is probably the most fun of industries. And I am now the CMO of Cadillac.
Thank you. And Andy?
Hey, good morning. Andy Thomas, Vice President of Marketing and Communications for McLaren of the Americas. So I'm responsible for the marketing in both North and South America. Been in the automotive sector my entire career. I started on the dealership side, had roles in sales, marketing, and product, and then drifted over to the ultra luxury side for the past 15 years.
The ultra luxury side, I like that. So let's talk about 2020, probably the most interesting year, certainly in my life. A very interesting year for everyone, but also not only a challenge of a year, but a year that we learned a lot. So let's talk about the biggest lesson that you've learned in 2020. Andy, why don't you start?
You know, for us, being a small brand, I would say the biggest lesson for us was an online reveal of our new supercar, the Artura. This showed us how powerful we all know online is in various ways. And the statistics we got from this, just to give you an example, our impressions were 3 times what they were for the 720 launch, which up until that point was the most successful launch in McLaren's history.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. Melissa, what was your biggest lesson from 2020?
Yeah, I think the first thing for me was personally, I really learned to reprioritize my life and how I want to live moving forward. So I think that was a real big thing, just having everything stop and change last year. But then I think from a work perspective, and I've always been in data-driven marketing, but really leaning into data, being nimble and shifting to digital, I think were the big lessons that we really learned last year.
Angela?
Oh, really good answers. I think from a macro standpoint, I think the ability to be flexible because there were 1,000 obstacles and challenges. And every time we thought we had a clear path to, some semblance of, sanity, something new got in our way. And it's still continuing into 2021. So, being flexible and adaptable, I think is a really good trait overall. And, like Melissa, data became even more central to how we could make those decisions very quickly and, being able to lean into that. And I think also the behavior change that people had, that that really broke the automotive industry, which traditionally had been, I think, slower to adopt digital retailing. For us, we were surprised at how fast everyone had to suddenly adapt and get that online, so that way we could still do business in many parts of the country when it shut down last year. So, and that's flexible, being, just able to do that on a dime. So I think flexibility, but also data and digital retailing for automotive, I think those were 3 really big lessons.
And Allyson, what did you take away from 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of everything that I've experienced, all of the same things that everyone else has mentioned. I think the rapid acceleration into online retailing, it really proved out experience law. Consumers are used to shopping online. They're able to do that with most CPG and most items. And actually automotive is kind of the one area that there hasn't been that much progress in. And I think over the last year, you've really seen how consumers are wanting that type of experience. And I also think for us on the OEM side, it's being able to offer both, because in-store shopping is obviously going to continue to happen for consumers that are wanting that type of experience. But for those consumers that are ready to do the whole thing online, you have to provide that experience as well. And so it's not either or, you actually have to be able to flex based on what consumers are wanting. And I think that's really the key takeaway. So much of what we do right now, and it's based in data and it's based in insights, but it's based on what the consumers want instead of what we sitting in our ivory tower think is going to be appropriate.
So how have car buyers changed? The process has changed, but how has the buyer changed? Who wants to go first?
I'll start. The buyer has changed a lot, I think. First of all, I think we previously thought millennials were not going to buy a car in a traditional way, own a car or buy it in a traditional way. And I think we sort of broke that a little bit. And when public transportation became unavailable or was not an option that people felt comfortable with coronavirus, people really thought about car ownership in a new and fresh way. Subscription services, Uber, Lyft, those didn't seem so viable either. And so we saw, especially older millennials who are, having families and especially being cooped up for a year, really wanting that vehicle, which equated to freedom for the first time. It wasn't about day-to-day commuting and get to a job back and forth. It was about the ability to really have a vehicle to just really enjoy your life. And so we saw a spike in younger and wealthier buyers. That was a shift. And then of course, the use of digital tools, and Allison's absolutely right. There will be a need for our dealers and that experience. There's just something about the sheet metal and kicking the tires of the car. It is an expensive purchase for most people. So they do want to see it live, but they don't want to spend 4 to 5 hours in a F&I office figuring out paperwork. They want, it's really a computer on wheels. Show me how great this car is. That's what the experience should be at the dealership, not trying to get the deal hustled down to, a couple bucks this way or that way monthly. And so people want to get all of that part done before they hit the dealership. But when they get to the dealership, they want to have this great experience about this great vehicle they're about ready to purchase. And so I think we really saw that elevated, that this duality of the purchase is I think it's here to stay, and it'll continue to evolve in that way.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think one of the biggest shifts that we saw, again, building on what you were saying, Allyson, is this was such a dealer heavy shopping experience until last year. And when that went away, we saw this shift that I think probably everyone sitting here had been really hoping for years. And we were suddenly able to innovate. We were able to shift that shopping process into more of what we wanted it to be and do some of the storytelling, create some of the digital experiences. We have something called Cadillac Live where people dial in and they have one-way Zoom conversations. These are the types of things that I think we always had wanted to do, but with consumer behavior shifting, we're able to now, I think, because I agree, I think a lot of this is here to stay, and there will definitely be a shift back into dealer showroom, but how do we create more of these experiences? And now people have they've gotten used to it. It's, last year I thought it was so interesting how long, it takes about 3 months for a habit to form. Well, we formed all these new habits. And so I think a lot of this is here to stay.
And I think it's also, and I think all of these experiences have created an even more informed consumer. And so they're wanting to be able to engage in brands. They're going to be looking for that information. And for us on our side, we need to be able to provide that information where they are in the different types of formats and platforms that they're expecting it. And so again, I think it still goes back to our consumers. Yes, Angela is exactly right. I think we have seen younger buyers that are more interested. And I think, you know, if this were 5 years ago, that didn't look to seem like that was going to be the trend. But these buyers are also coming much more informed. They have higher expectations. They're wanting to engage in a very digital way with the brands based on where they're shopping and what their needs are.
Andy, have you seen a change in your buyer?
Most definitely. I think just what everybody on the panel said, our buyer is staying up there and doing all the research. And I think whatever level of car you're buying, the trends are the same. So in our case, what we're seeing is our buyers want to control the conversation. So they want to be on the leading edge, and digital gives them the ability to do that. They can do all the research. They can go online. We found through research that YouTube is actually a greater place for decision making than Google in the case of our cars, because people want to be able to experience them. But again, like Angela said, there's nothing like going into the dealership and driving the car and having that connection. But again, they're waiting until the very last moment to be able to go in and do that.
Well, and you know, you make a good point, is that people want to have that personalized information. They want to have their questions answered. So tell us how that data collection has changed in terms of giving the potential buyer that personalized marketing message.
I think I can start on this. I think it's changed a lot, and it continues to change as much more privacy regulations come into play. I think what we've been able to see is that now we're so much more informed on our side about where consumers are in their shopping process. And it's resulted in, you can't have a one size fits all anymore message for people. You have to understand where they are, how close are they to purchase, or are they not close to purchase at all? And then how do you start to tailor that communication? And that's how all of this data, we're able to take that and start to make real-time decisions on the right types of messaging to be, you know, interacting and presenting and engaging consumers with. And then I think, you know, as these privacy regulations change based on the platforms, I think it becomes so much more important about really making sure that you have a healthy and safe amount of first party data. And then how do you match that with third party data to really be able to deliver those types of personalized messages moving forward?
Yeah, I think that's really true. And that's for us, the same thing on our side at Hyundai. And, you know, data is just, there's so much of it. That's one thing. And so how do you use the best parts of it to make the best informed decisions? I think one thing that got really accelerated last year was moving from reporting on the past to using that data with predictive models to see what we really need to move to do in the future. And the whole point of finding those customers where they are in that journey, to your good point, Allyson, and then delivering that right message, is to make everything work more efficiently and effectively. And so we've really moved to that better place. Still a lot of work to do with that. And then the other interesting thing is, just from the owners of our vehicles, of course, the telematics on the car tell us a lot in general terms about what people are doing. I mean, people are driving more, not day-to-day commuting, but just with longer trips, mostly on the weekend with families. And that's also been an interesting thing to watch. So data helps inform a lot that we do. And it continues to be a primary focus for us on how to use it to our best advantage.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you guys have just said. We're in very much the same place. And when you start to look at personalization and what that means, what technologies we're using, that is just as important as the data, because I think, like you said, there's data all over. So how do we start to get the right technology it's technology driven creative now. And that's what's going to drive the personalization. So that's been a huge focus to us. You know, everyone says AI and ML, but how are we going to really use those types of things to drive the right experiences and keep it manageable, but keep people really engaged? So I think it's a huge shift. And I think really exactly moving from like, how do we start to predict where and how we need to be, has been a huge focus for us.
And the products that you have to look in the ways that you're going to communicate different levels of product within your portfolio. Things like AI, we have to be really careful with because our customers expect a very custom, very personal engagement. So they're very quick to not latch on to AI or to turn us off at that point.
So, and then my next question, Andy, I'm going to start with you because you just mentioned personal engagement. So how do you, tell us about that data journey that informs your personal engagement. How are you using data to really create that one-on-one connection?
Well, in our case, the emotional connection to the car is the most important. We call it a belong factor. So no one needs a McLaren. I think we can all agree to that. It's a very much an emotional purchase. It's an unbelievable driving car. So when you get people that buy into this culture and they don't just want to buy the car, they want to be part of the brand. So it's our job to really cultivate that. And one of the ways that we were able to do this through the pandemic is we engaged our best owners in a 60-minute Zoom call to ask them research questions about a future product that's 3 years away, that's going to be really another brand icon for us. And that does two things. We get real world information on the car and the driving dynamics, whatever you want to ask with that customer directly. And that customer gets to be a part of the development process because all of these are comments that we've taken in from a global perspective. We weave that in, and we've actually had some subsequent calls, which really pulls that customer in and makes them feel part of McLaren.
Melissa, you want to take that next?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's really interesting for us how we're using data because it really, we're using data everywhere. So it depends on where we are. The first place where we're really using data is who do we want to talk to? And more importantly, who wants to talk to us? So we've got to get the targeting right so that we're talking to the right people. And then as we're moving through, we need to understand, and I think we were talking about it before, where are they in the shopping process? Are they just exploring? Do they want something a little bit more experiential? Andy, you talked about it. I think, we say more test drives happen on YouTube than in dealerships. So how are we making sure we have the right content in the right places? How are we using both data and technology to get that creative there? And then once we have, and we've talked a little bit about ownership experience, how do we then keep people engaged, give them the information they want, make that really interesting and immersive moving forward? So it's being used all across the journey, and we're really just trying to make sure that we make it more enjoyable for people to interact with us. I think that's really the net of it, because car buying can be very painful and can be too much of that in dealership. I've been working with F&I. How do we remove that and make the dealership experiential to make the shopping experience fun? I think that's really where we're shifting to.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Melissa. And one thing that's interesting that happened at Hyundai was we were really attracting an older buyer. That's who was coming back to buy us over and over again. And that's fine. We love those older buyers all day long. But as we saw this shift to this younger buyer who was more interested in finally a portfolio that met market needs, we were a little late to the SUV market, and we finally got to a place about 1.5 years ago where we now have a full line of portfolios, a full portfolio of SUVs, sorry. And suddenly we had a younger buyer. Well, we didn't know much about that younger buyer. We needed to shift quite a bit to understand how to still attract that older buyer that still loved Hyundai, but how to also talk to this new younger buyer, which was a totally different mindset. And they do have some shared values a little bit, but they are different in the way that they approach just how to buy a big consumer product like a car. And so we had to use data to really understand that and do a lot of focus groups and research to dive down to make sure we're just, to your good point, Melissa, you want it to be an enjoyable experience and really get it to be personalized so they're coming into the brand and they feel great about it before they've even purchased the car. So for us, that was a huge shift this last year.
And I think and very similar with us. I think, at Nissan, we've been on a huge product transformation similar to what Angela has been talking about, but we've launched 10 new models in 20 months. As part of that, in order to go to market with our marketing strategy, we wanted to make sure that we weren't, again, just developing this one size fits all. So even when you're looking into a specific segment, vehicle segment, from there we went in and did advanced audience segmentation, where we have actually 4 to 5 different audience segments within that one vehicle segment. And that way we're able to really target based on what those types of people are looking for, because it's not going to be exactly the same. Even if you're looking at an SUV, you're going to have consumers are going to be different. It isn't just one single buyer. And so we wanted to make sure that we're able to have messaging that is relevant based on what their needs are, and then also how we deliver that and where that is and where they're going to be shopping. So we have applied that piece of it. And then I think also we talked about the performance piece of it, but there's so much that is expected from us on the marketing side about how we deliver that effectiveness and efficiency. And so how do you take a strategy that was a little bit of a black box and then apply a lot of rigor around that so you get those stronger performance metrics so you know what's working or not. And what we've seen is that as we've been going through this product transformation, this advanced audience segmentation is helping us to deliver a higher quality customer. So we're getting people that are coming in with much more higher FICO, higher household incomes. And we're just seeing a very strong buyer that's coming in as a result of both the product as well as who we've been targeting.
So coming to a customer who's in market with a very specific message is able to not just bring the customer in, but also increase the FICO score and these other things, making them a better target for purchase.
Yeah, and even the time to convert is actually even faster. And I think that just scores to the point of much more personalized data that actually delivers a stronger and a faster time to conversion from when we first started to engage with them.
That's incredible.
Because we had a little bit of a panic at first when we made this shift looking for this higher quality customer, because we didn't have the giant number of leads. And we had a smaller number of leads, but they were better leads that did convert faster. But the mindset in that, just organizationally was like, what happened to our leads? It's like, well, we just got rid of the people who weren't really interested in us, which is not going to cost us as much money to keep pulling them in. We're not going to fish for those fish that want to get away. So that's funny organizationally when things like that happen, but it is data that forces you to go into a new area. And, you just don't want leads for lead's sake. You want high quality leads that are going to actually convert towards your brand. And so why not put your money there? And so that was a good one to finally get to a place where everyone understood that lower number of leads let's look at the conversion and let's look at the total sales.
That's incredible. So let's talk about how that is informing, and all the other things we've talked about, informing your long-term strategy when it comes to data. What do you want from your data in the future? What do you want it to do for you? What do you want to see?
Yeah, I think just on that, when we look at long-term now and a shift that we're all in, is as we're starting to look at and we've talked a lot about first-party data and how we match and being very safe, as we're looking at cookie deprecation and the changes that are going on and the privacy safe way, which is, I believe in 3 years, we're all going to be in a much better place. I think consumers are going to understand what their data means and when they want to give it. I think that we're going to have a much better exchange in the way that things work. But as we look at that, I think those are the kind of, higher level questions that I'm contemplating is, how do we create this exchange? What is that going to look like? What's going to be our data versus, how are we going to match that with people? It's going to shift a lot of the ways that we're doing things, but I think in a very good way. The other thing is, as you look at matching with partners, and as Google's moving to Flocks and everyone's moving to more anonymized data, and we're talking about how we're targeting, it's just going to be a big shift for all of us in how everything is approached and how you're measuring and making sure that you are not talking to the wrong people who don't want to talk to you. So those are the big questions I think that I'm pondering. I think answers are starting to surface a little bit, but I think that we're about to go through a huge period of innovation right now, and things will be very different. So it's going to be a really interesting and I think a really good time.
Yeah, and I think it's.
Oh, go ahead, Allyson. Sorry.
And one thing, we're looking at it organization wise. So I think we talked, and I think Melissa mentioned it. This has typically been, data has been very siloed, and Angela also talked about how, we have so much of it. We actually started looking at what do we do as an organization to really stitch together all that data. We're bringing it in-house. We're having much more active ownership of that piece of it. but it's really connecting all the dots. And I think what's going to be interesting moving forward, just overall for us as OEMs, but also for us as marketers, is how do you take that to the next level based on where privacy is going? But then what happens once you have so much more connected vehicle information? What happens when, 5 years from now, where you have a lot of the cars are going to be connected, they're going to be connected to other cars on the road. How do you start to use that information that provides value to the customer and isn't just another thing that is intrusive to them? And so I think it's important to look at this not just as marketing in a silo, but actually how do you help that? And I think this is where marketers, we can use the collaboration, how we're already doing this from a personalization standpoint, but how do you connect it across all of the experiences that consumers are going to have with the vehicle, with you as a brand?
I think that's such a good point, that is really the future, isn't it? Is understanding how people are going to use their vehicle and the experience they have in it. I mean, the vision from our chairman is this idea of progress for humanity, or smart mobility. And the experience in the car is changing very rapidly. We're going to launch an all electric vehicle at the end of the year, the platform we have an Ionic now in the US, but it'll be Ionic. But it isn't just the electric platform, it's the experience in the car is quite unique and different. It feels very futuristic, but the future is here. And all of that is based on data. And you have to opt in to have us collect that data. We can understand a lot more what people are going to do in that car and then deliver that experience back to them that they really want. I think that is an interesting part of product innovation. And then from our side in marketing, there's so many tech platforms and the technology is changing so rapidly. Again, we probably collected too many partners, to deliver on all of this. And now we're in a phase of we're streamlining because we want to have a seamless experience on the website through our digital retailing and then ultimately through the purchase. And having too many partners makes that a jumbled and complex, piece behind the scenes. And so we're working on that as our next foray, is to really streamline that process, be willing to change up our partners. We love longstanding partnerships, but we also want to be best in class. And so that, again, goes back to the idea of being flexible and looking at what's ahead of you. And it's changing so rapidly. You've just got to be willing to take a new look and always be looking at it from a fresh perspective, just thinking about how to best deliver on everything you need to deliver on.
Yeah, I think what Allyson said for me is value. I think you have to create a value in the communication you're having with the customer, and they have to see that. And it's also about giving them a level of control that they're comfortable with all the changes in data protection and technologies. And I think just what everybody said, I think being adaptable is incredibly important. And I think you have to go out there and try some things, even though they may fail. Right. Changing so quickly. You got to go out there, try new things in these different types of digital media and data and see what works for your brand.
So we have a question from viewers, and that is about the cookieless future. Do you feel that your media agencies are preparing properly for a cookieless future and looking for and testing credible alternatives?
For us, yes, I think we've been preparing for cookieless, probably for the past year. So I think, everything was pointing in this direction. So we wanted to make sure that we were going to be ready for it. So yes, I feel like that. I think this is a rapidly changing environment. So I think it's going to be important to make sure that we understand what's going to be coming and be able to adapt to it.
Yeah, us as well. We could definitely see it coming. It's not new news. So we're working on that, and we don't have it completely figured out. I mean, it'll be a challenge because we relied on a lot of that information to help us serve the right message at the right time. But there will be things to help us do that and also respect the privacy with individuals. But yeah, it's definitely underway on how to do the best job we can in spite of that.
Agree.
All right. Thank you so much, Allyson, Angela, Melissa, and Andy. Thank you so much for being here with us. Haley, I'm going to pass it back to you.